Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to start with the finished product as always, and we're going to be going over making a little 3D wooden maze with steel ball bearings inside of it. When we're going through this, everything is going to be done using Lightburn. You don't need Adobe Illustrator or any other art tools to create this. And I'm also creating this again on my Atomstack A5 M50 Pro Diode Laser, which is a 5.5-watt Diode Laser. Because of that, all of my layers are just from the thin basswood. If you have access to a CO2 laser, I would recommend doing a cutout of clear acrylic for the top. I think it has a nicer look to it, but this will work if all you have access to is a diode laser. As you can still see the ball bearings inside there, so it's perfectly acceptable as a gift or as a toy or whatever you might want to do with it. What you'll see here is that it is actually made out of 4 different layers. The base is just a 2mm basswood cut out with a 100mm circle. The 2 middle layers are, one is cut out of 3mm thick basswood and the other is cut out of 2mm thick basswood. The reason for that is my ball bearings are 4.5mm and I didn't have any 5mm basswood. So instead I just did a 2mm layer and a 3mm layer and then glued them up with the exact same design. The top is also done from 2mm basswood, and it's the exact same layout as the inner pieces, except this gap is smaller. So with 4.5mm ball bearing, the track on the inside is 4.7mm for the gap. That allows the bearings to flow smoothly and not get caught anywhere. But for the top layer, it's only a 3.5mm gap. My reason for that is, again, you can see the ball bearings through it, but they can't fall out at any point in time. So there's no way for them to fall out. You don't worry about losing them or causing a choking hazard. So it's a fun little toy. You can get very creative with it. In this video, I do a very simple maze with just some simple cutouts and then a standard middle piece here to catch everything to solve the maze, but you can get really creative with it. I'll go over a few things about how to get creative with it and different options when I'm inside Lightburn here in a moment, but hopefully you'll find this video useful and handy. If you like it, leave a message below and let me know. If you have suggestions or ideas for ways I can make this better, or just different ways I could do the maze in general, I would love to hear it. I'm always looking at ways to improve what I do. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump over into Lightburn and get the design created. We'll start here in Lightburn with a blank project. Come over and select the circle shape, hold Shift and drag it down just to get a nice perfect circle in there. Come up here to the width and height and change it to be 100mm by 100mm. I'm just choosing that size because it's easy to work with the math, and it's also about 4 inches, so it's a good hand-sized toy for the maze. This edge here will be the outer edge that we'll use for the bottom layer, for the layers of the map, as well as the top to hold everything in. The next thing we need to do is come over here and we'll select that circle. We'll Control C to copy, Alt V to paste in place. You can also do that here from the Edit tools, paste in place and copy if you don't want to use your keyboard shortcut. We'll come over here and we'll make this one 80 by 80. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make each of these circles will be the outer edges of the walls for the maze. So I'm going to do them in increments of 20mm going in. I do that because that ultimately leaves me with 5 walls. So I have 4 interior paths for the ball bearing to go through. So we'll Alt V again, and we'll do that one at 60. We'll Alt V again and put that one at 40. And then last Alt V and put it at 20. So like I said, these are the outer edges of the wall. The next thing we need to do though is we're going to go ahead and copy all of this and paste it. So we have 2. Now the reason I'm doing this is because the inner layer for the maze and the top layer are going to have different dimensions for the gaps to make sure the bearings can't slip through from the top, but can run smoothly around the inner tracks. However, the outer edge wall is going to be the same. So this allows me to make sure I have everything equal. We'll come back over here to this one. For the next circles we're going to put in, we're going to do another set of circles, and this is going to create the gaps for the inner track that the bearing will go through. The dimensions for these circles will be based on the size of the bearing you're going to use, plus the kerf of your laser. The kerf is, of course, the amount of material that is lost or burned off as the laser is cutting it, because that's going to allow you to know exactly how much space you need within there for the bearing to roll smoothly. In my tests, I needed to adjust the spacing by 0.2 millimeters to give enough room for the bearing to move through. Also in this one, I'm going to be using a 4.5 millimeter ball bearing. So what I'll do is I'll take the 4.5 millimeters, I will add the 0.2 to get 4.7. And then because it's a circle we're working with here, I need to double that to 9.4. So what that'll look like here is I'll come here and I will take the circle here, Control C and Alt V, and I'll move that to 89.4. Alt V again and 69.4. Alt V again, 49.4. Alt V again, and you guessed it, 29.4. So now we can go through, we can group these. And what you'll notice here is in Lightburn, if you click and drag to the left, it gives you that green box. That will select anything that it touches rather than having to select the entire object. And then I'm using Control G to group it. Select and group, select and group. So now if we go through and we move this to a fill layer, you can see we've got these walls, and then we have these gaps here, which are the inner tracks for the ball bearing. If we zoom in a bit and we come over here to the ruler, you can see here if I measure from here over, it's going to give me the 4.65, which is roughly the 4.7. I'm not at the exact middle of the circle, so that's why it's a little bit off there. But it does give me that 4.7 millimeters track for the balls. Go ahead and zoom back out, turn off the ruler, set this back to line mode. The next thing we need to do before we make any other changes here is add in the spacers or the gaps that allows the bearings to kind of fall through to the next track. So we'll come over here, we'll select the rectangle, let's draw one in here, and it needs to be the width that you need for the bearing plus the buffer. So we'll make that 4.7 millimeters wide. We'll select that, select our circle, and we'll align their middles. And this is going to come down to, we want to cut this out of each of the inner tracks, not the outer track, because that's going to be the outer wall where you don't want the bearings falling out of there. So we'll Control C, Alt V, move that down. Control C, Alt V, move that down. And we'll come over here and we'll select, oops, come over here and select those, and we will subtract front. Oops. Subtract front again. Subtract front again. And you can see that's going to give us that 4.7 millimeter gap that we need for the bearing to be able to go through. So if we come here, come across, see we're exactly 4.7 millimeters. So that's the exact width we need for the ball bearings. We'll zoom back out. Now, having it like this makes a maze way too easy. We're not looking to make an overly complicated maze, but it does need to be a little bit different. So we'll select this inner circle. And then in Lightburn, you can see here we've got a period to rotate clockwise and a comma to rotate counterclockwise. So with this inner one selected, we'll go ahead and dot dot. And now we have top gap, bottom gap, top gap again. That way it just allows it to roll through, and you have to work with the maze a little bit to make it go through. In theory, you could leave it just like this. The problem with that though is if you cut this out and you build out the build out the maze, you're going to have to lay things out exactly right. You'll have to do some engraving on the base layer so you can see where to place things, and it's much more difficult to align things. So what I like to do is come over here and make another rectangle. We'll make it the 4.7 again. And we don't need it to be that tall. We'll make it 8 millimeters tall. And now what we can do with this one is if we come over here and we align it to the middle again, and then bring it down here. What we can do at this point then is we'll bring this over and we'll get it aligned exactly with like so. And we'll copy that, paste it, bring it down, copy that, paste it, and bring it down. Now, what we will do then is we will take these two, select them, and we will Control W to weld them. Do the same thing for these, weld. Same thing for these, and weld. Then we will weld these pieces together as well. So you can see now here, you've got the bearing goes around this outer edge, comes in here, can go around this way, come in here, go around this way and come in here, but you have dead end walls. This way, everything is connected. We'll connect the middle piece here in a minute to make it a lot easier for doing your placement and get everything aligned. One thing we want to do though is we're going to go ahead and paste that piece in again, and we will center it with this, and we'll just move the rectangle down here to the bottom. And this is just so we have a final wall in the inner piece, and that center component is connected to everything. Select both of those, weld. Select both of those, weld. This last one is going to be a little bit different. You can see this isn't connected, and we can't just weld it because of the way Lightburn works with those objects. If we select both of these and we hit the Control W to weld, you see it really just cuts out that middle piece because of the way the objects overlay. So what we'll do instead, with all of those connected, we'll come over here and we're going to select the option for Boolean Union, which will connect those. And now you can see if we change this back to fill mode, we have a full maze where you can travel around each edge, going through each layer to get to the middle piece for the solution. But each end also has a dead end where the balls will capture when they're twisting within the maze. So that is our bottom layer, or the middle layer for the actual maze the bearing will go through. We'll go ahead and move over to this one though. Now this will be our top layer. And in this one, we need the gaps to be small enough that the bearings can't fit through, but enough so that you can still see the bearings on the inside. So for that one, I'm going to do 1 millimeter less than the size of the ball bearing. So 3.5 millimeters. Again, just like on the other one, we've got to double that because we're working with a circle. So it would be the 7 millimeters. So we'll select that circle, Alt V, change it to 87 and 87. Lock the aspect ratio. Alt V 67, Alt V 47, Alt V and 27. Now we'll come back through and we'll group these just like we did the other one. Now again, if we go back to the fill mode, you can see it's exact same, except it's a much more narrow track here. That will allow us to have the balls seen through from that top layer, but small enough that the bearings won't drop out and cause risk of choking hazard or anything like that, losing the ball bearings. We do still need to go through and do the cutouts. So we'll come here and do a rectangle again. For this one, we'll just make the cutout here 2 millimeters. And I'm making it much smaller just because we don't want to show it too much, and it allows us to work with the angles a bit better. So we'll take that and we'll center it here. Go back to line mode. Take that and bring it down. Okay, we need to make it taller. 8 millimeters tall. Okay. Control C, Alt V. Control C, Alt V. Okay, and we'll come through and select both of those minus front. Both of those minus front. Both of those minus front. Now the next thing we'll do is we'll make another rectangle, and this will be the connecting piece there. So we'll just do it like so. For this one, we'll go ahead and make it the 4.7. That way it fits in well with it. Not too concerned about the height, but we'll make it back to the 8. Go ahead and center it. Bring that down here. Let's go ahead and zoom in. Okay. Control C, Alt V. Bring it down. Control C, Alt V. Bring it down. Oh, I forgot I need to rotate this. So we're going to select this one. Period, period. That rectangle, and let's bring it down. Okay. So we'll go ahead and weld those, weld those, weld those, weld, weld. And then Alt V one more, bring it to this one, center. Bring it down here. Select both and weld, all of that and weld, and select all of this. And again, we have to union, not weld. So now what we have at this point, we've got the inner layer for the maze that is big enough that the bearings can travel through it safely, smooth traveling for the ball bearing. And then this one, which is the top layer, which is a much more narrow gap. So you can still see the ball bearing, so you can tell where it's going, but it's small enough that the bearing can't drop through and fall out and cause a choking hazard. Now, because my ball bearings are 4.5 millimeters in diameter, and my basswood that I'm working with, I have 3 millimeter basswood and I have 2 millimeter basswood. I don't have 5 millimeter basswood. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a middle piece here out of 3 millimeter and out of 2 millimeter and then glue them together. And then I'll do the top layer out of 2 millimeter as well for that top piece. The bottom will just be a 100 millimeter circle without any other cutouts on it. And that would be from the 2 millimeter as well. If I go over here to my settings for my 3 millimeter on my Atomstack A5 M50 Pro laser, I need to do a speed of 250 millimeters per minute at 80% power with 3 passes. For my 2 millimeter, I need to do 300 millimeters per minute at 90% power and 2 passes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out a base layer, or I'm sorry, a middle layer from the 3 millimeter and the 2 millimeter, then a top layer from just the 2 millimeter, and then a 100 millimeter circle also from the 2 millimeter. I'm going to go ahead and we'll go through, I'll show the laser doing the cutting for this so you can see how it goes through or skip over it, whichever you'd like. And then we'll come back together and I'll show the actual assembly of the different pieces, as well as adding the ball bearings to get that finished product. And here we are with everything off of the laser. We've got our bottom piece, which is just a 100mm circle. We've got the 3mm thick middle piece. That is the actual maze the ball bearing will run through. We have a 2mm thick version of the middle, also for the ball bearing to run through. And then we've got another piece that's on 2mm that has the thicker walls. That is the top piece that will sit on top of everything so that the ball bearings can't pop out through there. So the bearings I'm using, it's just a little set I got right here. I'll be using these 4.5mm ball bearings to go in there. The way I'll be assembling it is with this glue here. I will use the thin applicator. I'll go around and I'll do an edge of glue on here to glue it onto the base. I'll do the same for this piece to glue it on here. I'll add in the ball bearings, and then I'll glue up the top piece to hold everything together. I'm going to get this started. I will come back in once I get the bottom and the two middle pieces set so you can see with the ball bearings and how it works before I put the lid on. I have now completed gluing together the base layer there, then the 3mm and the 2mm inner piece to provide the working area for the maze. I went through and I just did the glue like I was showing around the edges for it, and then did a weight to hold it down to get the edges aligned properly. Now what we can see at this point is if I take the bearings, 1, 2, 3, where they are now, you can see they all roll through. They can go through the entire maze and everything works the way you need it to. Of course, because you saw them just drop right in, they can fall right out. And that's where this top piece will come in. What I'm going to do now is with the ball bearings in there, I will go through and glue this up to have this aligned to it as well. And what you see with this is at that point, you can still see the bearings inside there. So you can still see how the maze is being used so to play with it, but they can no longer drop out. So we now don't have a choking hazard, and we can actually use this as a real toy without worrying about the ball bearings getting lost or anything like that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and stop filming and glue this top piece on top of it. And all I'm going to do is I will take my craft glue, again this simple, very quick, dry, clear craft glue. I'll do a dot here in the middle on each of the endpoints to make sure everything holds down, and then at the cardinal corners, well, cardinal positions, not corners on a circle, and then I'll drop the top on there, get everything aligned, and then use a weight to hold it down. The good thing with this glue is it cures initially in 5 minutes, and then it's a 24-hour for finish cure. But after that 5 minutes, you can pick it up, test it to make sure you're working on everything the way you need to, and you're ready to go at that point. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, then we'll come back in to wrap everything up, and that'll be the end of the video. And now we are all set. The top has been glued on. You can see that it sits on top of the bearings so that no matter what, they can't come out. Gives it a nice safe toy so you don't have to worry about the bearings falling out and causing a choking hazard or getting lost. But it does still allow you to see the bearings as you're working through to kind of work the maze and get them into the middle there. So all in all, it's just a fun little project to do. You can be very creative with what you do with your layout. I did this one very simple for the example with just the 3 cutouts to allow it to work through, and then the same for the walls to block it so that it only has one way to go through the maze. You can get as detailed as you want, be as complicated as you want. I do just recommend that whenever you're doing this, do keep something connected for it so that you're not trying to freehand place everything. It will just make you a lot happier and allow you to retain your sanity as you're going through this. The last thing I will call out is something I mentioned earlier. I have a diode laser, which means I can't cut clear acrylic. And that's the reason I had to use this top layer with a slightly thinner gap to have for the top of it to keep the bearings from coming out. If you have access to a CO2 laser though, you can cut out a 100mm acrylic top. I think that'll look a lot nicer. You don't worry about obstructing the view at all, and you can get a lot fancier with your design because you don't have to worry about as many connectors or blocking from the bearings from dropping out. So that's all there is to it. If you have suggestions or ideas or ways I could do this better, please leave me a comment and let me know. Otherwise, I hope you found this handy, and good luck out there lasering, everyone.